Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to video number 5 in the build series of the Skymaster XXL F-14 aircraft. This thing is going together so well. I'm pretty sure in this video we will be bolting the front part of the fuselage onto the main part of the fuselage. So we're making some wicked progress on this video. We do have a bunch of things to take care of before we bolt that on, so let's dive back in. All right, so I'm not really sure why this project is going so well. Maybe it's because we did the smaller one and we've got a bunch of the stuff figured out. But I think that small video took like 12, 14 videos or something like that. So I don't know why, but things are going very well. So last video we got our flaps done on the wings and we basically got the engines installed. So engines are already installed, pipes are installed, and things are going really well. We've got a bunch of the back end stuff still to deal with back here. So we've got to get our vent line figured out. Our vent line is going to go on this side of the aircraft. We've got to get our tanks plumbed. So there's a lot of stuff to do in this section before we bolt that nose on. So let's take a look and continue moving forward. All right, last video we finished up with getting our pump mounts glued in and our UAT mounts, our flat mounts glued in, as well as our air tanks here. So I'm going to get the fuel pumps mounted next. So I've got our plates marked out here. So all we have to do is drill 2 holes going through there, put some 3mm screws through, and our pumps are basically going to sit just like that. So super simple. Wiring wise on this guy, we're basically having our wiring come right down the center. That's why we put those keepers on the bottom of the fuselage. So that's going to keep that nice and simple. I'm pretty sure that our vent line is going to go right here. I think that's what we did on the smaller F-14, and this allows good access. Then you can put your taxi tank right on top of the fuselage here. I was going to put it kind of in the center part of the fuselage right here. The downside is it's kind of hard to get at, right? So this is nice and simple to get at, and it's pretty well hidden as well too. So we just have to make sure we've got access in there to get everything done up. That's the key. So that's where our vent line is going to go. Compressor we're going to mount on the bottom of the fuselage on this side, which is the right side of the fuselage. Last video we finished up with programming the V-speed compressor. So if you're wondering how to do that, check that video out. And there is a link to the build series in the video description. So I've been trying to do that with the videos now is all the build series, put a link to the video build series. So when you click on that link, it'll take you to all the videos kind of organized in succession, I think is the right term. So what we do with the compressor here is this is the way they come from the manufacturer. So these are the 3D printed mounts, the base pieces. Obviously we can't screw these down to anything unless we mounted some wood. So what I like to do in this case is just use High-Sol and glue these mounts to the bottom of the fuselage. And if we ever have to change this compressor, which we have done in the past, basically undo those 4 bolts, compressor comes off, bolts right into the existing mounts. It's a universal mount for the V-speed models. So we'll get that thing glued in probably at the end of today so we can let that cure. So let's get the fuel pumps mounted next. All right, mixed up a whole bunch of High-Sol here, 9462, and we're gluing a bunch of things in now. So we're going to be gluing our compressor into our rear front portion. And I've also decided in the front of the aircraft, instead of doing a whole bunch of individual pieces to support the different items, I am just going to use this entire plate. Now, the reason for it, it's light ply. It's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's got to be cut down a little bit. It's too long right now, so we've got to take about 1 inch off of it. But because we're using these 3/4 inch plywood blocks, these are going to act as risers for that tray. So you can see here, we're coming up above everything, so that's going to be where the tray is. So all of our wires that come from the back end, they're going to go underneath the tray and remain hidden. So it's a bit of a compromise here with keeping this plane looking pretty, but also being functional. So if we started putting blocks in for all of our different items, we need all of our air valves and everything, we're going to end up with a whole bunch of random pieces of wood. Our air plate would be a big piece. So I think overall, we're really not adding much more by just using the entire plate. So it's a compromise between light, cleanliness, and a clean install. So we're going to get these guys glued in place. These are obviously hidden when they're all done, so yes, they're kind of ugly pieces of wood, but all they're doing is serving a purpose of bringing that tray up. I did think about using cross braces. The downside is the fuselage is not overly strong on the side, so if we start adding like 2 cross braces, it's a lot of force on the side of the fuselage versus using those blocks. They're going to be tucked into these portions here, these angled portions, which are quite stiff, right on the 90-degree angle, or the angle inside corner there, which is also very stiff. So putting our startup tray together here, we've got our lines going to our fill valve and gauge. That comes to a Festo T. This Festo T is going to go forward in the aircraft and tie into our air system. I had to do a little bit of sanding on my through fittings for the lines to fit through there nicely, but that's pretty much ready to go. We'll screw down our fill valves here in a little bit. Now last night, the last thing we did was glue down all of our risers here. Those are all done and good to go, and trimmed off our plate a little bit, about 1/2 inch off the plate. And now this plate is well sized to fit in the front of the aircraft. So that's 2 layers of primer on there. We're just waiting for that to do its thing, and then we'll be painting that red. So what I'm working on now is getting our startup tray installed in the aircraft. All right, so I've set my main line up here, and what I've done is covered the line with a 6mm piece of Festo tubing. So this just fits over the black Festo line, the 3mm air line. And the point of that basically is when you have stuff touching this carbon, you really want to protect it. It's very abrasive and very sharp edge. So like all of our lines that go underneath the carbon there, they're all covered with snake skin. And this main airline was probably going to be going through that same gap. But you know, as we start adding things on there, it's naturally going to touch the carbon. So that's the reason to protect it. And just one more little step. So we're ready to run the line through and get our fill lines run through the board. That's almost done. All right, organizing. So out of the compressor, you want to use a piece of Teflon tubing. That's very important because that's going to get very hot. It doesn't have to be overly long, a little section like that. We use a check valve, so this allows air to come out of the compressor but not go back into the compressor. Now that does affect things a little bit. Reason for that is you get telemetry from your V-speak compressor. So our pressure that we're reading in the compressor is basically this section of tubing right here. But we also get telemetry from our Zykoy sequencer. So this is really where our telemetry comes from that we use to run the aircraft. And this is also a fail-safe unit as well. So this goes from a 4mm line to a 4mm check valve. We're going to use a little right angle 90 there, comes up, and this is a reducer. So this goes from 4mm down to 3mm, and this is how we tie everything into the air system. So this is going to sit right here. It's going to come up, and we're going to tie into our air system right there. All right, so a couple little tips and tricks here for you. So we've got all of our lines done up for our main air system, joining the pipes and everything together. I like to do this beforehand in an area like this because you really don't have good access. These are kind of in the way. So what we've got here is this is our line coming from the fill valve at the back. This comes all the way to the top. This line here goes to our one tank on this side. This line here comes down, tees off. That's going to go to that tank. And then this lead here, which is a Festo line, that's going to tie in to our air system, which is right there. We've got a keeper installed on the check valve holding everything nicely in place, and there's our plug-in right there. So very, very clean, and we'll use keepers to hold these guys up on the fuselage. So that is the next thing we're going to plug away on. All right, so here's the stock power leads for our turbines, and these are going to work out well because we can plug this into our data relay module. So right on this side right here, that comes through our former work here. And then we can tie in our compressor to that as well, and then extend that line coming all the way forward. And then same thing's going to happen with our other turbine. We're going to have a split lead, and that's going to power the swing wing system as well. So those will work out great. So we've got our leads done up here for our power system, so that's fine. And so I'm just cutting off the XT60 end there, and this gets joined to that, plus our little extension for the various items. We've got our Tomcat supervisor hanging out, making sure we do everything properly. So we've got all of our leads kind of cleaned up in the midsection here. I'll show you. The wires coming from the turbines, wrap those in spiral wrap just to protect them. And just been working on the midsection here. So we've got the signal wires and all of our function wires coming down the one side here, the left side, and all of our power leads and air lines coming down the right-hand side. So pretty much everything's done. The only other leads to run back here is I'm going to put a connector right on this side brace right there, and we're going to spiral our lead from the compressor, and that's just going to plug in right there. And then our fuel pumps here, we need to run a line. We're going to run it up and kind of hidden out of the way towards the data relay module, so we'll get those done. And then the last thing to do is our plumbing for our UATs. So I've kind of saved that to the very end. It's a bit of a pain, of course, because we've got to lock wire all of our connectors, and things are pretty tight back there. But all right, so as I mentioned previously, we are doing our output. Thanks, Nez. We're pairing up our outputs. This controls, or this goes to the swing wing. Now, the one thing I did here is our middle is positive and our two outsides are negative. So I flipped one of the connectors around, so positive is common, negative we're pulling from both sides. I don't know if that matters, but maybe it's just a little bit best practice. And then we've got our other lead going over there beside the UAT, and that just plugs into the battery lead itself right there. So this is going to get Velcroed to the base of the fuselage right back in this area right there. All right, getting ready to install the UATs. And what I like to do here, because this is going to be a bit of a challenge to get at our fittings when these are installed, obviously install the line first. So the center line, if you're not familiar with how these things work, this goes to our fuel pump, so our fuel pump is pulling through the filter, and this line goes to our tanks, our main tanks. So as you're pulling fuel, it's coming through this line into the UAT, through the filter, into the fuel pump. So we'll get these guys cinched down, and then we can finish plumbing those guys up. We've got our leads here. These are for the fuel pumps, so we're just going to get our ends crimped on, and then we can run these leads between the data relay module and the fuel pump. All right, and the last thing to do here before we put our front portion of our fuselage on was a couple things. So we had to run our fuel lines going to our turbines, which have been run back. Obviously tie wired those guys. We use some of our keepers here. Those are 3-4 millimeter keepers. Those are available on our website, so we just ran that down the side, and she looks awesome. So gooped the connections going into the swing wing controller, and that is everything in the midsection of this plane. So I think what we're going to do is, if our tray is dry, we're going to get the tray drilled and set up and ready, because doing that now with the fuselage split is going to be easier than when these pieces are joined together. So we'll get that done, and then I think we're ready to join this fuselage. That also gives us some time to think and make sure that we are good to go forward. All right, guys, so we're kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of everything here, and before we join the fuselage together, I want to mount the 900 in the rear part of the fuselage. So we're going to get this paired up to the system. So we've got our radio on, and we are in our wireless modes trainer. So we're going to turn the 900 on, and we're going to pair our receiver with the system. So we will just power this separately and pair. There we go. So we've got our 900 bound. So we can unplug that. And now we can take our 900 and we can go, I think this is the right port. So that's going to go into our EXT1 port is the plan. So we'll see how this all works. So our 900 antenna, we don't have it set up yet on the screen. So what we'll do is we will get that set up on our next screen. Antenna 900 megahertz right there. And we'll just use, we'll use double sides. Okay, so on our second screen, we've got our 900 antenna, and that is on there. So we know our 900 is working properly. And now we'll go into our Device Explorer and just confirm that we're happy with everything. So we will go in, General Settings, Output Period, 11, low voltage, 7 volts. And just checking the pin configuration here. So output pin number 1, which is what we're on, is a servo output. So we want that to be, so E2, we're going to change that to EX bus, sorry, E1. So now we need to plug the lead into E1. And now this is actually outputting a signal. So before it was just getting power from the central box. So that's why it was registering the antennas. Now this is actually outputting a signal from port E1, and that is going into the central box. So now if we go into our central box 400, and we can go into EXT1 and change this to receiver. So now EXT1, which is where we're plugged in here, is set up as a receiver. So now what we're going to do is we're going to confirm this is all good and works before we bury this receiver. So we'll go back to our main screen. So port number 1 is aileron, so we'll go into, we'll just put a test servo into port number 1, and it operates as an aileron servo. And if we go into wireless modes trainer, disable primary module, yes. So now it's operating on 900 megahertz and it's still working perfectly. There we go, now we're back to normal. The other thing we can do at this point is we could just take the primary receiver, unplug it,
backup transmission active,
and it's working fine. And there we go, receiver reboot. So if we look at our little check marks here, we've got our primary receiver and our 900 all set up, so that is now good. So what we can do is we can get this mounted into the mid part of the fuselage. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a line going forward to our central box, which is going to plug into our EXT1 port. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have an extension from our EXT port run all the way to the front of the aircraft. Now this is the same setup that we did on the SU-30 from Skymaster. So we've got EXT ports all run to the front, Cortex ports, fail-safe sequencer from Zykoy, all run to the front. So when the owner gets this aircraft and we go to bind everything, all we have to do is plug our bind plugs into the EXT ports, and it's super simple. So just like we've got on the SU right there, we've got all of our plugs accessible from the front of the aircraft. And what that does is it allows you to bury things in the aircraft wherever they are going to fit best, not have to pull the whole thing apart to access those ports. All right, so we've got our 900 receiver installed there on the side of the tank. We've got our antennas mounted on the top of the fuselage. So that's done. And our lines are run forward in the bundle here for the EXT port and the port that plugs into the central box. So getting ready to drill out our front plate so we can get that mounted and get our screw holes done here. What I've done is put some masking tape on the side of the fuselage, marked out our points for our risers. So we'll pop the tray in there, get it nice and centered, and drill those guys out and create our mounting holes. All right, so main tray is installed. We've got that drilled, so we'll pull the main tray out now and treat our wood with some CA, and then we are ready to join these fuselage pieces together. All right, and it is that time to join the pieces of the fuselage together. This is always a bit of a milestone in an aircraft assembly, and yeah, this is no different than any other aircraft. We do have a lot of the stuff already done with this midsection, which is great. So It's going to be, I think, pretty quick from here on out. So we're grabbing the front of the fuselage, lots of Loctite, our bolts, and putting this thing together. So we've got 5 bolts holding the pieces together, and then we've got 2 smaller ones that join the side of the fuselage, the nose section, into the intakes here. It's a long reach to get back there, but I can do it. But, yeesh.
Little guy like me. Nope.
Nope. And fuselage is joined. Now that is quite a distance back there to the very back, so I'm glad we did all that stuff because reaching it is going to be a real nightmare, very much so. If you did need to get for some reason to the very back, the fuselage may need to be split. So it's a chore. I can reach back there, but somebody a little bit smaller won't be able to. So, but most of the stuff is kind of skewed towards the front. You know, we've got everything gooped, Loctited, fastened, and everything. So even if we, let's say, needed to change that compressor in the future, I'm able to reach that compressor with my arm, no problem. So that is wonderful. Now what we need to do is work on our board layout. We have the central box, 400, which is going to go somewhere like that. We are going to probably do a through fitting right here, or we may do one on each side. Actually, that's probably what we'll end up doing. And we'll do one at the front here. Our Cortex is going to go on the board as well, and then probably the rest of it will just be air items. So fairly simple stuff. Now it's just a matter of doing all the organizing. One thing I've been thinking about a little bit is putting our lock valve at the front here. So we can just have these 2 lines go to the lock valve and then just have an air line feeding the lock valve up here. I don't know, just something I've been thinking about. Doesn't really matter, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. Not a whole lot to show right now other than it's really messy and we need to start organizing stuff. All right, so we pulled the nose back off. I completely forgot to tie into our air system for feeding all of our air systems. So what I did was I added 2 T's here, and we're just going to have 2 air supplies just to prevent everything running through one supply. And initially I was thinking about putting everything on the air board, or the main board, but I think I'm going to put all the air valves on the side of the cockpit here so they don't interfere with the cockpit at all. Lots of room, and this will allow us to have everything kind of a little bit more neat if it's put in that area. Because one thing that is difficult is trying to make these valves look good and lay out really well. We've got a lot of valves to put in this aircraft, so fitting them all on this board would be a bit of a nightmare. So what we're doing now is, while we've got this thing apart and everything laid out, I think we're going to do all of our leads that we can, rather than trying to do them inside the cockpit and front fuselage area. So we know that the longest these are going to be are essentially to this kind of area, unless we've got some other ones. So we can pretty much just do them 2 hand widths long to this point right there, or to the front of the intakes, and all the excess can be laid just underneath the main board. All right, guys, nose is back on, and we are quite a few steps ahead. So we've got all of obviously our wire leads done up here, and just figuring out where we're going to put our air stuff. So instead of putting the air stuff on the main board, I'm going to put it on the sides here of the nose gear. So this allows us tons more room, can feed all of our airlines down here, doesn't interfere with anything, so it's just a great spot to put them right there. So our gear airlines are going to be on this side. We've got our sequencer fail-safe, which can go right there, which is perfect. So that's good. And then the other benefit is, because we have these 2 airlines, we've got more options now for feeding our air system. All right, so next thing on the to-do list, we are going to get all of our air system installed before we do anything with the main board. The other thing that allows us to do is to get any of our air valves our air valves that aren't going to the sequencer, we need to run extension leads back to the main board. So So what we need to do first is program our Zykoy failsafe / sequencer. Now these units are pretty straightforward. It took me years ago, it took me quite a bit of time to actually figure them out. But essentially you've got gear down condition, gear up condition, and steps in between. So you need to go through and program each of those steps. And when you do gear up, for example, it goes through those steps. When you do gear down, it goes reverse of those steps. But each of your outputs needs to be programmed accordingly. Now, one of the key things I've found over the years with the Zykoy sequencer is, in this case, if you're using 2 valves on an aircraft, so we're using one for the main, one for the nose doors, you want to have these wide to channel 1. So that's kind of an important step. If you go one of these to channel 1, one of them to channel 2. Sometimes when you turn your aircraft on, it doesn't initialize number 2 properly. So just one of those little things that I've started doing every single time, and it's just saved me a bunch of headaches. So we will have a Y cable done up, and these 2 will both go to the Y cable. The doors we'll just put in port number 2. So this is all plugged in right now. We've got one of our screens in the terminal. We've got RC input going to our gear channel, and if we take that off, now our system is going to turn on. Now I'm not sure if it's going to initialize without the 900 plugged in, so that's curious as well too. So we may have to turn our 900 off. So we'll turn that back on. Yeah, so let's turn our 900 off. So menu. So our 900's off, so now it should run fine with the way it is. So let's try that again. So we'll go into here. Yes, we've got a radio input now. What I was looking at was that this was receiving a signal. So right now we are receiving a signal. So gear up position, we are in the gear up position. We'll save that. Gear down position. Save that. Perfect. So now it's going through the different steps and gear down. So yeah, so that's that. Take you through the other steps. So radio setup. The other thing I initially do here is pressure setup. We can change this to PSI. Failsafe pressure 0. So I want to leave that at 0 for now, because if we put a value here, let's say we put 60 PSI in here, our gear is not going to cycle properly unless we have air coming to the input. So with this at 0, there is no failsafe setup at this current time. Okay, so that's what we do there for the initial setup. And then now we need to change our telemetry output. So telemetry setup. So right now, port number 5 right there is on as a functioning port. We're going to change this. Jetty, so port number 5 is off, and now the telemetry is set up for jetty. And we'll just go back and double check. So port number 5, jetty. So that's good. So now if we plug port number 5 into one of our ports here, we would get telemetry for this unit, which we don't need right now. So in this telemetry thing, we can also set up an alarm pressure. So that's set up to 43 PSI. I'm going to increase this. So it's going to give us an alarm at 65 PSI. Actually, we'll set it to 70 because I suspect we're going to have our fail-safe at 60. So alarm pressure 71. There we go. So that's our initial setup of the sequencer. We do need to go in and adjust the actual sequencer adjustment itself, but I'll do that off camera. It's fairly straightforward. I've covered it in other videos, but essentially you can see here you're dealing with open and close positions. So the gear, which is channel 1, right now in the gear down position is open. Doors are closed. So you just go through each of the steps and you identify what you want each of those steps to be. So when we go from a gear down to a gear up position or condition, you know, when we cycle that gear switch, we want gear to go to close, as an example. Doors should be open. Doors will stay open. Doors will stay open. Doors will stay open. And then as the last step, doors will close. And then when we do the reverse, doors will open. Doors will open, doors will open, and as a final step, gear opens. So anyways, I'm gonna get this plugged in, work on it, and I'll come back and show you guys. All right, so we've got all this stuff programmed, it's all done. The valves are pretty straightforward. These are the Jetronic high flow valves. The instructions that come with them are quite straightforward, so just follow the instructions. The high flow or these EvoJet ones, they just work out of the package as long as your channel is minus 100 plus 100. There's no programming that's needed. They work fine. So those are all programmed now, and I'm just going to do up my Y lead, and then we can start to get these installed in the aircraft. So we've got all of our gear valves and door valves obviously installed on this side. Initially I've got these labeled with a paint marker. I'm going to print some labels, go back and get those labeled up. And we're getting all of our other valves ready to go here. So we've got our brake valve, our air brake valve, we've got our canopy, open, close, unlock valves. And what I do in this situation is I spiral the wires, so that's the first step, and then get these things plugged in and set up. So initially when these Zykoy valves come, they come to a non-turn on unless you do something stage. So it's a bit of an issue because, well, it depends on the setup you're using, but basically I want these valves to either be on open, on close. So the instructions are on the side of the valve, but it's pretty straightforward. You just touch the button while it's powered and it switches modes. So, but we've got these valves set up here now, so we'll label these valves, and then we'll also label the open, close, lock, unlock side of them as well. I like to do all of this before we get them installed in the aircraft because it's just so much easier. And then when you're running lines to these things, you're just taking your green line, putting it here, your yellow line, putting it there, and it's simple and it's done. So we're going to get that stuff set up as well. We're just using our label maker to print the labels. All right, guys, so about 8 hours later, I know that sounds crazy, but we worked on this thing for a couple hours in the morning yesterday, and then we worked on it from about 4 o'clock to 11 o'clock, so whatever that is. Anyways, and we got all of our air stuff basically wrapped up. So I'll give you a bit of a brief explanation here on how we've got this organized. So first of all, we've got all of our air stuff in the back, right? Compressor, tanks, all that. We've got 2 lines coming to the front portion, all of our air valves. Our gear and doors are on this side, which is the right side of the aircraft. Our other items are on the left side, and we've got our canopy, lock and unlock right in the nose. So the way I structured this is I had one of our airlines, black airlines, coming to our gear, both nose and mains. So this line just feeds the 2 gear solenoids. And then of course it tees off and goes to the Zykoy sequencer. The second line comes to our doors. So that just feeds the doors, and we've got that teed off, and that feeds also the air brake. So the air brake and the doors obviously can function at any time you want. Then what we did is we added a T in the door open line, which is this green line. So the only time that our brakes and canopy system is pressurized is when the gear is down essentially, or the doors are open. The reason, now sometimes I would do it on the gear leg of things, but I did it on the doors just because we've got one dedicated line coming in here, so I just felt that was a better solution. So what happens is we've got a tee off here, comes over to this side, it tees off and feeds our brake, our canopy, and then it goes forward and feeds our lock and unlock for our canopy. So that builds in a little bit of a fail-safe with the canopy. So when you're flying this aircraft and you know, the canopy's down, the locks are engaged, there's no way for that canopy to open up. Even if you flick the canopy switch, if you had fail-safes in the radio and everything, it won't open until you drop your landing gear. So a little bit of a fail-safe built in there. Brakes, you know, brakes are off, brakes are on. Again, it builds in a little bit of a fail-safe so you're not losing pressure on the brakes if your brakes are leaky. So that is the setup. Now I tried to keep this as organized as possible. I think it worked out very well. I'm happy with everything. We've got a bunch of keepers put in the base here. All of our air lines are underneath the main board. We just focused on the air lines at this point. So all of our servo leads and power leads and everything are back there, but I'm happy with this. It's clean, it's tidy, it's serviceable, and everything's good. We use some of our 3D printed servo plugs here to plug our valves in. So again, kept it nice and clean. Those extensions all come to the back here and they're all labeled as well too. So that is beautiful. Very happy with that, and I think it turned out awesome. All right, so I would like to cycle the gear on this thing, and that is kind of one of the nice deals with the valves here is the Jetronic high flow valves. This yellow switch operates the gear, so you can cycle these things without any power in the system. And then of course our orange valve here, I forget the name of it, but you can push the little button and that'll open and close the doors. And then our Zykoy ones, they've got manual buttons on them as well too. So we can check the cycle of the gear now without any of our electronics plugged in. So I need to enlist a little bit of help here to get this dealt with. So let's find beautiful wife. Okay, so I've got the back end supported here on the former work where the exhaust cones mount. We're able to cycle this gear now, so let's see how this works. Unfortunately, beautiful wife had to leave, so we'll be able to do one at a time. The other side is clamped off, is how I've done it. So pressure-wise, we're a little bit low, like 90 PSI. Beautiful. That is awesome. So good. Okay, and I'll do the front here for you guys as well. So this is, again, just manually controlling this. That is beautiful. So good. Very happy with that. I'm glad the gear works awesome. All right, now a couple important things with the valves that we're using on this aircraft. There is functionality. I like the EvoJet valves, the orange ones. They work really well. They nice setup and all that stuff. But one of the important things with the Jetronic high flow valves is right now this aircraft is off. We've got, let's say, 80 PSI in the gear system. The gear is pressurized in the down location. So that's an important thing when an aircraft is getting transported on its gear. So something like the F-14, the Su-30 behind us. The Su-30 has locks on the main gear, as does the nose and the nose of the F-14. But something like the F-14, it's just relying on the little spring in the scissor linkage to keep that gear in the down position. So something like this, the down leg is pressurized, and if I try and lift that gear up right now and adjust or collapse the scissor linkage, I'm fighting the air pressure to keep it coming up. So that's one of the things I really like about those Jetronic valves. So guys, that is going to wrap up video number 5 in the build series of the Skymaster F-14 aircraft. We made some good progress in this video. We got lots accomplished with organizing. Next video, we're going to start off with working towards our electronics being installed. So I don't know how far we're going to make it in the next video, if that'll be the final one, but that's always a reason you should subscribe to the channel and you should stay tuned to all the videos because there's some cool things coming up. So thanks guys for watching. Just a little plug here for you. Definitely check out the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. Our After Dark channel, we do live streams generally here from the shop for about 2 hours every 2 weeks. I love it because you guys get to interact if you're on the live stream, and it's tons of fun. Last thing is channel membership. There's some links down below, but channel membership, you get to see the videos early. So right now, channel members can see videos that are like 1 to 2 weeks out. Like we might have 2 to 4 videos uploaded to YouTube, and they get to see all those videos before they're released publicly. So it's kind of one of those cool perks. It is a paid service, but if you're interested, check out the links down below. Thanks guys for watching, and we will see you in the next video.